Good morning and welcome to the Core Connection. I'm Mira Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network, and I am back from a 2-week hiatus or a 2-week adventure. I went to Mexico, and today's topic is re-entry. So we're going to talk about that and talk about new perspectives and what changes when we allow ourselves some distance from our everyday routines and circumstances. But before we get started, let's take a minute or two to get present. So let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen flooding your lungs, flowing into your bloodstream, nourishing all your cells, your organs, bringing vital life energy to your body and being. And as you exhale any tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. This time, imagine brilliant, bright light, lighting you up from the inside out, illuminating, electrifying, and energizing all your cells, all your molecules, your electrons, and creating a brilliant beam of light from your heart out into the world. And as you exhale any remaining tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's press our palms together, rub those palms together vigorously to feel that electricity, all that energy, that friction, all of that motion. And then as you stop rubbing your hands together, feel the tickling and the tingling. Allow all those sensations to bring you present right here, right now, into this remarkable physical form that enables you to experience life. Welcome, welcome, welcome. It's great to be here with you. And I just got home on Wednesday, and I am still finding my way back. And what's interesting about this is that when we go away, when we have some kind of disruption of routine, we have an opportunity to see things differently when we return, and maybe come back with a new sense of appreciation, maybe come back with new perspectives. And the idea isn't necessarily to jump back in to the way that things were. We get to use the opportunities we're given to shake things up a bit and maybe come back renewed and refreshed to see and appreciate things in a different way, or perhaps to recognize areas where we can shift and transform for toward a more positive and productive end, or to recognize that we get to shift the patterns that have become so familiar. So I'm not sure where I am yet in the process. I definitely have come back with new perspectives and an appreciation for possibility. I went to this wonderful city in Mexico called Pátzcuaro, and it's from the 1500s, late 1500s, and it is so rich in history and culture, and the culture there is so very different, such a huge contrast from what's familiar. The streets there are pretty much all cobbled. Driving is a very different experience there. The pace of life is very, very different, much, much slower. People are much more connected. There are open markets where people trade goods and food. And I was one of the few white faces there, which also was very wonderful and interesting. The people were so gracious and generous. And it provided such a contrast on so many levels. The aesthetic there, so very, very different. Where I was, the natural countryside was absolutely spectacular. The elevation, it was 8,000 feet. And so it was in the mountains, and there were mountains all around, and incredible nature. So where I live currently, I'm on a emergency escape route, or an emergency route. So when there are snowstorms, for instance, the street that I'm on gets plowed automatically. There's a lot of traffic, a lot of noise, and there was a lot of traffic and a lot of noise where I was in Mexico, because I stayed right in the center, the city center, which is very, very, very historic. However, it wasn't cars rushing by. It was cars rolling by, more like, again, because the streets were cobbled. And if you try to drive at speeds we drive at here, you just total your car. It was fascinating because it was like this wonderful, magical place of unexplored or hidden adventure. So along these mostly narrow streets were building fronts with doors, and you'd see all these doors, and you wouldn't know what was behind the doors until they opened. And when they opened, it was just opening into worlds of magic. So there might be a store behind the door. And by the way, these doors were quite remarkable, so many of them, being that they were potentially centuries old. A number of them were wood, some were metal, some had beautiful door knockers on them, and others of them just looked like they were kind of boarded up. And when these doors would open, they would open into a new world. So behind the door might be a store of some sort where people had goods for sale. It might be a workshop. It might be opening into a restaurant, or opening into a courtyard. A little narrow passage into a courtyard that was filled with plants and just opening into other worlds. It was so fascinating and delightful. It was like fairy tales in a way, where anything could be behind these closed doors, and they opened into new worlds. So that was really quite remarkable. And also it was so interesting because you'd have this sort of timeless experience of being able to go through time and bring these different worlds into the present. And also the aesthetic was very, very, very much different than here in the US. There was, I guess I could just call it squalor in the midst of beauty. So it was a study in contrasts in so many ways, where there would be an incredibly gorgeous countryside and houses that were falling down, or piles of debris just sort of mixed right into everything. So it was very much a world of contrasts. And yet the experience for me was that people were so much more connected. People were so much more present, more open-hearted. There was such a warmth that I experienced from people, and people were more connected to the foundational things in life. The stores seemed so much less commercial. Even the big box store that that I had an occasion to see, one of these stores where you could buy everything from produce to any kind of grocery, to washers and dryers, to bicycles, clothing, all of it in one big store. There was a sense of patience and slowness, slowed pace that was so refreshing. There was no point to rushing anything. You couldn't rush. So the requirement was to slow down. And when you slow down, you actually get to smell the roses. You get to appreciate what your surroundings are. And in this case, it felt, hello, hello, hello. Gia, welcome. Good evening to you. Gia says, hello, Mira. Rubin was just missing my evenings with you here. Well, I'm so glad that you are the first to welcome me back from my adventures, Gia. So good to be with you. And I was just talking about the difference in worlds. So having just come back from Mexico, I got to see my daily life in sharp contrast to the pace of things, and kind of the shifted values of things in Mexico, at least in this particular city. It might have been very different had I been in Mexico City. So Gia says, please tell me about your adventures, want to know. So I'm talking about this place that I visited called Pátzcuaro. And actually I visited other cities around there as well, a place called Iguazio, and another place, I visited a number of different towns, and what was similar about them was this corridor of doors and worlds existing, whole new worlds existing beyond these doors, and really no inkling of what might be behind the doors until they opened. And they even the businesses, I had a hard time discerning when businesses would be open and when they wouldn't. Things would appear and disappear. And the streets in this town, a number of them were very, very steep, like you would find in San Francisco. So there was a lot of walking up and down inclines, and just being able to be slow enough to pay attention and recognize the beauty and the really truly different aesthetic than here in the US. You know, here we're used to things that are, I'll say, for lack of a better word, manicured. And there was a sense of rusticness about things. And I would say a deep, rich vitality. I just felt so much closer to the essence of life there, where it wasn't the same kind of fundamentally sterile kind of environment that, or I don't know if sterile is the right word, antiseptic maybe, environment here. Time passed differently there. And the people just were incredibly warm, you know, authentic smiles shared just walking down the street. And it didn't feel like appearances were as important there as they are here. There were people with native traditions there. And it just, hello, Rosalind, thank you, TGIF to you. It's my first official day back. Thank you for the welcome. It's great to have you here. I was just talking about the magic of this place that I went to, and it's actually designated as a magical town called Pátzcuaro. And there are ruins. Now, we've heard of the Mayans and the Aztecs, but I certainly had never heard of the Purepecha. And apparently they are a very ancient people, and the Aztecs had attempted to conquer them unsuccessfully. And anyway, close to Pátzcuaro, there are two separate sites for ruins from Purepecha pyramids. And Rosalind says, how do you spell the town name? It's Pátzcuaro, Pátzcuaro. And it is designated as a magical town. And the scenery, you know, the natural scenery there is spectacular. There weren't very many Americans. Apparently there may be 80 Americans in the town, Americans and Canadians, but it's authentically Mexican. And in fact, it's a tourist destination for Mexicans. And it's known especially for the Day of the Dead ceremonies. Apparently it's a central place from which the Day of the Dead festivals emerged. And you know, it's interesting because I'm back. I got back Wednesday afternoon, and I slept most of the day yesterday, I have to say. And I really did love the pace of things. What I was aware of is that there's not the things that I would buy here. I guess I didn't go to I went to one big box store to see, what was there. I imagine that there are certain conveniences here that I take for granted that I wouldn't take for granted there. So now I get to appreciate those things more. But what I experience about being here where I live in the suburbs of Philadelphia, and I drive to pretty much everywhere. And whereas in Pátzcuaro, I walked pretty much everywhere. It was sort of like a constant farmer's market with all these different markets where you could buy food, you could buy all different kinds of clothing. I think what moved me so is that so much of it was undeveloped. So there was so much natural landscape that wasn't no skyscrapers kind of thing. The buildings were from centuries past mostly. And it felt so much more rustic in so many ways. Walking on the cobbled streets, needing to watch your footfall because there might be loose cobbles here or there, or it just was truly in so many ways being transported into a very different world. And I don't speak Spanish yet, so I was at a loss. There were very few people who spoke English, so I got to find some people that spoke English. I got to do a lot of charades with people, trying to communicate things, and people were so receptive and warm around it. I think the biggest thing that was different for me was the connectedness that people had. And the generosity of spirit. So more connected to life, it felt to me. I don't know a better way to say it. And a whole different set of priorities, it felt like there. Life was just, it felt much more easygoing instead of the constant press for productivity. Now, I don't know if that's because I was on vacation. I tend to think not. I tend to think that was very much how life is there, where it's much more chill. And there was a relief in that. There was singing and dancing and just a different sense of vitality is all I can say. So upon reentry, really what today was meant to talk about was reentry, and what does that look like when we've been separated from our lives, our daily routines, whether it's through a vacation or some kind of disruptive event. When we have occasion to return to our lives, we have the opportunity to have a new perspective and thereby a choice as to how we re-enter, what we engage in, how we spend our energy and time. And we have the opportunity to have a new perspective on that. And so there's a richness in that opportunity to reevaluate and reassess and to recognize patterns that we had that we might have been so immersed in that we didn't even know we had those patterns. And so this disruption of routine can be a very, very powerful thing to give us an opportunity to create growth and change, and to utilize those new perspectives in a conscious way so that we don't just fall back into routines that lack our presence. So I guess the opportunity, and it's an opportunity that we can make for ourselves at any moment, really, is to distance ourselves in some way or shape or form from the familiar in order to gain new perspectives. So I invite you to look at your life and the routines of your life, and to check in and see what ways you might be able to extract yourself from those routines for long enough to be able to shift them and bring conscious presence to those behaviors and patterns. Rosalind says every moment would seem new when routine is disrupted, so it would draw one's attention to be present to the new environment. Exactly. That's the point. So in my case, I was transported to a physically different place, and now I'm back and looking at my routines in a very different way, looking at my world in a different way. And I think that that's something that's accessible to all of us in any moment, if we choose to extract ourselves, to disrupt our routines, to be able to maybe find new patterns, new opportunities, new awarenesses. And there's a gift in that, because then we get to appreciate from a different angle the lives that we live, rather than being oblivious to its features, shall we say. So I guess that's the message for today, is give yourself the opportunity to disrupt your patterns. Gia says, you are truly an explorer. I love the way you see everything. Thank you, Gia. Gia says, I'm loving the conversation as well. Let it not end. Thank you. I invite you guys to check out, to just look up Pátzcuaro, and Patzcuaro. It's designated as a magical city in Mexico. And it was very much a different world, and a world that I felt more connected in, even though I don't really know people there. I felt like this feels like home. It felt welcoming. It felt really connected. And so I imagine also that we can all access a greater sense of connection if we disrupt our patterns, so that we can come back and look at them and and maybe reevaluate and maybe perceive things in a new way, with a heart of appreciation, recognition, appreciation. One of the reasons that I went to Mexico to see about living there is that I just felt in my lifestyle, I feel kind of disconnected from life, from vitality, from community, and I live a really nice life here, but it just feels like it's lacking heart in so many ways. Like the way that we live is very disconnected and frenetic and isolated and isolating. And I have to say that I truly felt much more connected to life and vitality when I was in Mexico, and beauty and squalor side by side. It felt like the values that people, I don't have no idea, I didn't have any values discussions with people, but it felt like values were much more aligned with life. Rather, it felt much less commercial, and really, truly, deeply down to earth. And just connected. So I get to be re-entering here, looking for connection, building connection. And I think as far as re-entry goes, that's probably one of the deepest things that I could bring back to my experience here is a different sense of connectedness. But I have to say that the scenery there, the natural environment, was amazing, astoundingly beautiful. And the nature that I have closely accessible here is very curated. I guess it is somewhat curated there as well. But somehow it just felt more wild, less manicured, more authentic. Anyway, re-entry. So I'm still in that process, and I intend to remain changed, having experienced this very, very, very different world. And I expect I'll be living there someday in the not terribly distant future, at least not for the next year or so. But yeah, I think that there's a call to my heart from this new place. And of course, there's internet too. So I get to continue with my things that I do for a living, and to join you guys and other ways of connecting that have been my prevalent means of social contact for the past couple of years since COVID, right? So anyway, I'm delighted to be back with you. I'm so grateful to you. This part of my day, this starts my day off so richly. And it's great to be back with you. So until next time, it's a weekend, so hopefully I will see you here again Monday. I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection, and I go live each weekday morning here on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page and YouTube channel at 9 a.m. Eastern. And I encourage you to check out the awesome programming on Enlightened World Network, Enlightened World Living, EWN One with the Earth, and So good to be back with you. So much love.